Hello again, everyone. Back here to talk to you about, guess what? Some more books. I sound a bit excited about that, really. Whoops, I put my hand on my mic, which of course David will hate. I have a lot of, as I said last time, lots and lots of books in the shop at the moment, and I thought, well, we could just get another little handful done today, seeing as I've read them all, almost, and oh, there are some goodies in this lot. So without further ado, we shall start with the silent patient author, Alex Michaelides, has written his second one. Now, when The Silent Patient came out, it was one of those books I said, oh, I don't really read crime, but I read this one and it's brilliant. And he really is a top-class sort of suspense writer, psychological suspense. This one, The Maidens, is, it's an intriguing read. I think I got through it pretty fast, though I revelled in the, I'm going to be frightfully posh here and say I did revel in a bit of the mythology that he, because you get a feel of that from the title, The Maidens, that he goes into Greek mythology, Persephone, Hades, the underworld, and I always like those sort of liminal spaces. So had a lot of fun with this one. It's set in, the setting is To Die For, Cambridge, literally to die for, because that's what happens. And we have Mariana, who is a young woman grieving the death of her husband, and she is a psychotherapist, and is well aware of her own processes and is constantly also analysing other people's behaviours. So you get, this is, I think, Michaelides' sort of comfortable area to write from is the psyche, the psychology of people, their behaviour, and he's very good at knowing what's going to make us get a bit tense or suspicious of people's behaviours, because we see things through Mariana's eyes, and she's sort of saying, this, little hints about, she couldn't quite put her finger on this, or she wasn't sure whether that person's was betraying some kind of guilt or feeling, or was there something fleeting in their eyes. I always stunned by how many very, very observant people we have who see fleeting expressions going across people's faces. I think that's quite a skill. I'm usually sort of like, were they smiling? Less about me, more about the book. So we do have a return to Cambridge, where Mariana had been there herself, where she'd met her husband, and now her niece, who is orphaned, is and has been sort of brought up, very much looked after by Mariana and her husband Sebastian, has now come to Cambridge to study literature, and there is an unexpected death in a group of one of the girls from a literature group, and it turns out that there's this very charismatic professor. There's a group of young women who seem to cluster around him like bees to a honey pot. It kind of gives an echo to something that I haven't had the chance to look at more deeply, but that sort of ritual of the underworld and of ecstasy, those kind of pre-death sort of supernatural coming back as bigger, better, brighter, and possibly in this case dead. Lots of nice characters, a wonderful setting, and as usual, not only do we have a twist that you don't really see coming, it's kind of prompted through a couple of letters through the book, but also a little wink, I think, when Michaelides brings in a character that was in The Silent Patient. So smart, very smart. Enjoyed it. Another one up, which I have not read, I will admit that I'm not a great sci-fi reader. I used to read a bit more, but David is. And he read Project Hail Mary by R.W.R. It's been out for a couple of months, and he kept grinning, and I sort of said, what's up? What's making you grin? Because he listened to it on audio, and he said, look, it's so good. And I'm going, really? Like, do you do sci-fi? And he said, God, yeah, I used to read heaps of, sci-fi, Ballard, everybody. And I go, okay, right, so what's so good about it? And I can tell you, he's got a nerdier brain than I do, but it sounded absolutely intriguing. Now, I didn't read it, he did, and as usual, he does this, it's just great. And I'm saying that doesn't help my reader very much, knowing what's great. So he told me bits of the story. And then I read the blurb, so I know, at least, that's one way you can get away with it. I did read the blurb. So you've got a guy who's sent out into space, and he has to save humanity. It's really very simple. That's what he's supposed to be doing. And he wakes up on this spacecraft, and there are 2 other humans, or they're now ex-humans on it, because they have not survived. And he has amnesia, and the computerized system will only give him access to certain parts of the vessel once he recovers his name and his function. And of course, it turns out he's a real techie, maths, engineering. And all of this, him being chosen for this mission, is to do with some wild, elaborate theory he'd come up with when he was back on Earth. And now Earth is is in great danger. It's something to do with the sun. I'm not sure I can remember all the details, but there are astrophages, and there's something that's eating power and whatever. Anyway, he's in space, and then literally somebody knocks on the door of his space. I know that sounds a bit stupid, but Weir says it himself in one of his interviews. He says, like, you're in space and then somebody knocks on your door. That's a moment of sort of like, am I going to answer it? And of course, it's contact with another life, a type of life, an alien, and their planet is also being affected by this phenomenon. And the thing that David said was the most fascinating is that he has a whole science based, I suppose, on scientific fact that from the world as we know it, so we would be applying principles of physics. So it's super nerdy and mathy, as well as being allowing that science to become plausible in another world. Highly recommended for your, you just want a good read, you want to read out of your comfort zone and maybe out of your Earth zone. Absolutely go for it, because it's a wild ride, and you don't get disappointed. I think sci-fi can sometimes disappoint you with, oh, well, that would never happen, or that's completely unrealistic. So this one, he kind of has an answer for everything, and that is highly satisfying, David felt. He really, really, really enjoyed that one. So for your nerdy friends, for yourself, want to try something different, do that. Now, I told you last time I did the reviews that I would talk to you again about R.W. McDonald's Nancy business. And, well, I am here to tell you a little bit more about it, because I had me vaccine the other day. To be totally honest, I felt pretty miserable after it. Nothing serious, I just felt very tired and a little bit fluey. And I said, what can I read that's not going to tire me out? I've been a bit picky, so I said, I know Nancy business, because I know that it's not going to make me cry. Well, it did actually, and the nice crying. So off I went, picked this up, and oh my goodness, if it's not the cure for everything. Possibly it is the cure for everything. And there are lots of books that, this is why books are so important, is that they can sometimes be the cure for things. They can make you think this is just a balm to, to a troubled heart or body. If you're just feeling a bit whacked. I giggled, and I had a little bit of a weep every now and then, because it's very affecting in a lot of ways. And I think that's a word that can be used in a funny sort of way, but I think it's very touching. Lovely. If you haven't read the Nancys, don't worry about it. You can go straight into this one, as what I did. I read them back to front. But you've got a young, we're sitting in New Zealand, but we have a young Tippy who's a young teenager, 12-ish, and she has her uncle Will and his boyfriend Devon, and they have come together. Tippy's father has died, and they've come, the uncles have bought I'm calling them the uncles together though, because that's how it feels, have bought a house, and they're going to renovate it. So this is Devon's area, because he is so flamboyant and so interested in the colour and the fabness of everything, and is such a good egg, because he's always kind of, it's very, very, very moving relationship between these two men, and I totally fell in love with them, as much as I fell in love with little Tippy, who's trying her best to deal with her father's death, which she thinks may have been a bit mysterious. So she's thinking about that. And then there's this huge bomb in the town square, and a person from the tulip farm is accused of blowing up basically the centre of the town. There's a lot of buildings get ruined, but mostly the town hall. And there are all sorts of relationships in here that you wouldn't suspect. There's sort of red herrings, there's gossips, there's this person was actually having it off with that one, and it sounds like an Irish country town, really. Sorry, and the way I'm talking about it is a bit like that, but it was just a romp. I totally loved it, and there has to be more to come from this trio, because they were just phenomenal fun, and it was nicely sort of how they did their clues, because they're based on the Nancy Drew, you know, that they referenced the way Nancy Drew would use her clues and the different stories that would say, oh, would this be a bit like this or a bit like that, what Nancy Drew does in this story. So it has both of those in it. I just thought it was great. So that was one of my big pleasures, got me through the worst of my COVID vaccine. Another one I read, very different. This is a non-fiction, and I know I haven't done an awful lot of non-fiction, but I picked this up, Brendan James Murray's The School, The Ups and Downs of 1 Year in the Classroom. So it's a high school book, and I thought, well, I know very little, not having put my children through the Australian schooling system, only through the university system. I sort of said, well, I wonder what it is. You know, I work with employees who talk to me about 8 hours, and they talk to me about schools, and they talk to me about rankings, so I thought I'd read this. It's an absolutely phenomenally interesting read, whether or not I mean, I think we all have to be interested in our education system without sounding too moralising, but you know what I mean, it's where we or ye have gone through that, and our children will be going through it, or some of mine won't. They've done that bit. So I said, well, I'll give this a bit of a read and see what's what. It's incredibly readable. And I think if you're going to tackle a subject which is as dense and possibly as fraught with opinions and, well, this can't be changed, or that can't be changed, or this system doesn't work, and there's going to be criticism, and there's going to be good things and bad things, and private schools get too much money and whatever, all of that conversation, it's going to be very hard to navigate that with any sense of lightness or an interesting thread to get through it, because it's all interesting. And this is a small school, state school, and he picks a handful of students from the different classes, from his literature class in year 12 down to his year 8s and 7s, who negotiate dreadful things. It opens your eyes a little bit to people who may not start life with any of the privileges or all of the privileges that other people do, and none of this sort of sense of entitlement. You know that the kids are there because they have to be, or because they want to be, or because they've fought a lot of things in order to get there, and it's a safe place for them. There are all sorts of elements in this. It's about how kids sometimes can turn around and teach you something about yourself, or about themselves, and how they see the others in their class, and how we might not be awake to or aware of what might be going on, and sometimes it's the kids in the class themselves who tell us. I thought it was lovely. I think he had a lovely balance between his personal life, not too much of that, his fascination with Peter Gary, which of course is well deserved, isn't it? And then these lovely and sometimes very sad, but genuinely uplifting stories he writes with huge compassion and a great eye, and I thought it was faultless. A great read, and one to talk about. 2 more to go. So 3 Women in a Boat by Anne Youngson. This is a little gem. I read it yesterday. I'm reading a book a day, which is phenomenal. I'm back to my reading pace, which is woohoo, good for me. Her first book, Meet Me Behind Museum, I think, was a book that I picked up 2 or 3 years ago, and was astonished by the simplicity and the quietness, if you like, of this woman's writing. She describes lives. I suppose this is what I liked about it. It describes a sort of a gentler pace of life, and I think that's harder sometimes to read when we're looking for this whiz-bang, satisfy me now world that we live in. So this is a very healing sort of literature. It's very calming, it's wry, it's tender and very amusing. We have 2 women who meet on a towpath, and because they hear this atrocious howling coming from a longboat or a barge or a narrow boat. I mean, there are differences, but and they break the window, they climb onto it, they realise it's a dog, and the dog is kind of hurling itself against the window of the barge. So they break it, they let the dog out. And they don't know each other. They just know this is a dog in distress, or was it? And then the owner of the barge, another woman, Anastasia, comes along and says, oh yeah, well, I see you met the dog, basically. And she's one of these very brusque, very self-sufficient, I'll do myself women. And nonsense, there's no point in trying to fix that window because it would cost an arm and a leg anyway. I'll nail a plank over it. So this kind of self-sufficient and unwilling to rely on everybody else. But this woman, Anastasia, as it turns out, the three women have tea together, as you do. We're in England, so everybody has cups of tea, obviously. And they decide, she tells them that she has to go. Well, I suppose this takes place over the course of several days, because both of these women who meet on the path have diverged from or they have had come to a crossroads, if you like, in their lives. One of them has just had to take the fall in an office situation where she was one of the top scientists, engineers, and she's sort of nerdy, a self-sufficient woman who's career-oriented, and the company gets taken over, the figures don't look so good, she'd signed off on things, she gets fired. And in the other one, there's a marriage that's been going on for a long time. She realises she's no longer really listening to her husband much, and her two children. She's done that, bored. And not just bored, she thinks there's more to life, that she's not who she should be. So these three women meet up, and upshot of that is that the two girls, or the two younger women, have to take this barge for repairs down to Chester. From where they are, and I've forgotten, my geography's dreadful, but it's a long old haul, and that's a rather good word for a barge, isn't it? It's a long old haul. And Anastasia has to go and do some tests, and you realise, that she's no nonsense, but it's not going to be good, or it's not looking good. And so it's about how these women fit into each other in a way, how they navigate each other, and it's very gentle. There's no acrimony. There's no, oh well, you're like this. It's all very sensitively done, because the whole point is not to make these characters clash. It's to show how cooperation and believing in the other person's better instincts actually makes for smoother sailing. I couldn't resist that. Beautiful writing. Other barges, other people come into it. You get a wonderful history of how the canals were built, of the stories associated with the canals, because we have a couple of colourful characters who are storytellers, and through them she gives us the history of the canals. And it's how they get there, get back, how they find out that other people who are looking after. Anastasia goes to live in the apartment of one of the two women, and how she negotiates the neighbours there. It's an absolutely, I've used the word balm before, and I'm careful to use it again, but I think it was a lovely soothing book with lots of wry chuckles, and I thought it was gorgeous. So she's an award-winning writer, so I think you're in very, not just safe hands, you're in very loving hands there. Now the last one up, gosh, shut up now, because I've been going on for a bit. Snowflake by Louise Nealon. There are no words for this book. I've done this once before. I've done this several times, because I've a couple of absolutely topping books this year. This one David was listening to again, and of course, you must think I have my eyes focused on him all the time. Well, I do, really. But he said, oh, this is so good. Oh my God, she knocks everybody out of the water for Irish writing. Now, I have an absolute thing for Irish writing. So, I have a thing for good writing, but a lot of Irish writing is good, obviously. I kept telling me how good it was, and I'm sort of saying, you've got to stop doing this. He was driving me mental. So I said, what's so good about it? And he said, well, think Donald Bryan, a bit of Sally Rooney, and not quite the Quillan Hughes, because she does something else for me, but he said, think that kind of writing. Now, if none of you has any idea what I'm talking about, if most of you will have read Sally Rooney's Normal People. This is not Sally Rooney's Normal People, but there are some of the same elements. And if you really did love that, there's a very good chance that you'll love this even more. But it's very different. I'm absolutely blown away by it. Again, it's a young 18-year-old who's been living on a farm with a absolutely lunatic mother. She has a beloved uncle who lives in a caravan, and he does all sorts of strange things, like he heals people and he knows about the stars, and he's just as brainy as they come. And there's a young fella living on the farm with them who does a lot of the farm work, and he's very much younger and is, you know, coochieing up to the mum. And in this, our young protagonist has turned 18 and has been accepted into Trinity College, and we kind of accompany her flashbacks to her past life, but we accompany her on this journey. She is so excruciatingly naive and gauche and self-aware, and fluffs everything. She reminds me of a lot of people that I knew, and partly me in there too, when I first went to Trinity College, and I wouldn't go through the turnstiles of one of the libraries because it wasn't my faculty library and I thought I wasn't allowed in. And it has that kind of stupidity in it, that if you don't know any better, you're going to inhibit yourself from doing things. But she meets this other wonderful girl slowly. It's not just a boom relationship, it's so cleverly done, who, you know, pops into her days, and this Xanthe, who she calls Santi, which is what we call Santa Claus, becomes a part of her life to help her, and helps her negotiate her first forays into romance and sex, and what, you know, her what life is about how to deal with her results, all of this stuff. It makes you, I don't know what it is. I suppose there's a point when you come across writing and you go, why is it so brilliant? And I had this feeling when I read Ella Baxter's Animal. Now I've lost the name of it, but when I read her book, I sort of said, what's it about her writing that makes me say, what is it about her writing? And Louise Nealon has done that same thing. She's gone into a domain or onto a level of writing that is just, it's just so good you don't even try to analyse it, and I think that's what I'm saying about it. It's an absolute joy to read. I'm about halfway through, and I'm driving you mental as well by not being able to tell you really why it's so good, but it's brilliant. So give that one a go. It's sitting there waiting for you, and I will have loads of that one in stock. So Ella Baxter's New Animal. I knew I'd get there, just my brain is... So that's it for me. I have a great pile, and I will be having more, I presume, but all of those, every single book there has something to recommend it, and it's going to recommend it to someone. So, so have a good old look at those, and I will see you in the next, I don't know when, but I can do some more reading. See you soon. Bye.